Hello to all my queer friends and allies. Today, we are breaking down Elliot Page's memoir. He faced remarkable obstacles on his journey to now be a thriving trans person. Now let's get started breaking down all 29 chapters of Elliot Page's transformative memoir. Chapter 1, Paula. As the memoir begins, it is months yet until the premiere of Juno. Elliot goes to the gay bar Reflections with a warm, kind girl named Paula. It is Elliot's first and only time until later going to a gay bar. Elliot and Paula dance the night away. Finally, Elliot asks to kiss her. It is the first time Elliot allows himself to feel this level of pleasure. That summer, Elliot goes on a month-long backpack trip across Europe with their friend Mark. The whole time, they can't stop thinking about Paula and their first and only kiss. Later that summer, Elliot and Paula go camping and do mushrooms. The music and ambiance are a bonding experience. Quote from the book says, "Shame had been drilled into my bones since I was my tiniest self, and I struggled to rid my body of that old toxic and erosive marrow." Chapter 2, Sexuality Sweepstakes. Juno has released, and one review in particular asks whether Elliot is queer. In a flashback, the experience mirrors what Elliot went through being bullied in school. Preparing for a soccer tournament, they roomed at St. Francis Xavier University with a girl named Fiona. Elliot tells her he might be bisexual. Fiona laughs, and it's not a kind laugh. Later that night, Elliot sits in the hallway reading Mother Night by Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut wrote, "We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be." The next day, at breakfast with the soccer team, he can feel Fiona maybe told everyone what he said about being bisexual. A few months later, Elliot and his dad visit his grandmother in Lockport, Nova Scotia, a small fishing village. Elliot overhears his grandmother ask his dad what he'll do if Elliot is a dyke. Back in the present, around the release of Juno, Elliot is told there's no way he can let anyone know he's queer. He must play the part. He must pretend. Planning for the release of Juno, he is told he cannot wear the same kind of outfit boys are allowed to wear to a movie premiere, the same kind of outfit Michael Cera is allowed to wear. A magazine publishes a cover asking whether Elliot is gay. He spent that summer feeling free to be queer with Paula, but the magazine includes a picture of Elliot with Paula, who is not yet out to her family. The season of love is over. Chapter 3, Boy. In the present, Elliot goes on a date as an out trans guy. His date asks when he knew he was trans. Elliot knew he was trans when he was 4 years old at the YMCA. He tried to go to the boys' bathroom. At 6 years old, he asked his mother, "Can I be a boy?" Times were very different, and his mom said he couldn't be a boy, but he could do all the same things a boy can do. At 10, people addressed him as a boy. It felt euphoric. He fantasizes about being an adult man free to love women. At 16, his favorite films include Malvern Collar and Ratcatcher, but before that, it was disaster and creature films like Anaconda. He experiments with his sexuality, but mostly with boys due to being rebuffed in his attempts with girls. When he's kissing a boy named Jason, a group of bullies calls them faggots, assuming both are boys. It's a strange kind of affirmation for Elliot, but then the bullies threaten violence. Elliot says he's a girl to no avail. He and Jason run to his babysitters, Elliot wondering how queer people process this kind of significant trauma. Chapter 4, Action Figures. It is 1994, and Elliot is about to turn 8 years old. His mother buys a 2-bedroom house in the Hydrostone neighborhood. 8-year-old Elliot loved playing action figure Olympics in the tub, as well as imagining he was Russ Jr. rescuing Amy Zielinski in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Elliot's mom lets him be himself, until it's time for pictures everyone else will see. His mom comes to dislike Elliot's friends and distaste for girl clothes. Despite it all, Elliot likes to remember the best times with her. A quote from the book says, "It is so sad that all the static had to get in the way as I aged. A dark rock on which to slip, suddenly appearing and taking us both down. That pure connection that went beyond appearance and expectations, both of us free in the moment. These are the memories I revisit." End quote. Chapter 5, Roughhousing. When he was less than 2 years old, Elliot's parents separated after 8 years of marriage. He remembers growing up along the Great Harbor, where he'd study ships that to his young mind seemed too big to glide on the water. His father began his own graphic design business. He remarried a woman named Linda, who became Elliot's stepmother. Elliot feels guilty about returning home to his mother with happy tales of his father and his new wife. Linda had 2 kids named Scott and Ashley who became Elliot's step-siblings. Elliot loves playing Nintendo at their place. It's an early window into the film industry for him, too, when Linda styles a decadent dinner for the movie 2 If by Sea. Elliot dislikes one big thing: everything Linda cooks. He prefers the simple meals his mom makes. But otherwise, Elliot loves living with his father the first 2 weeks of each month. He decorates his room like a boy. He plays street hockey with his stepbrother Scott, who is 3.5 years older. Wrestling and roughhousing is fun, except when it goes too far. When things go bad, Linda tells Elliot to shut up and stop being a brat. Around Linda, Elliot's father and stepbrother easily turn cruel. Linda is often cruel to Elliot, the unspoken question why he can't be more like his step-siblings. A quote from the book says, "I've always found it strange that my mother and father had a baby, me. Their relationship was already in trouble by the time I came along. I suppose gratitude is the course of action, but if I was not born, I'd have no perception of what I'd be missing, nor would anyone else miss me. This would suit me just fine. We are all microspecks, almost nothing in the grand scheme." End quote. Chapter 6. Jumpscare. Elliot remembers being cast as Charlie in his school play of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, as well as being cast as the lead in the feature film Marion Bridge. As he got more acting roles, he began to present more as a girl, which led to the end of people seeing him as a boy. But more importantly, he remembers when he got his first stalker. It was an older man who groomed him through an email-based pen-pal relationship, then obsessed over Elliot and how to get through any healthy boundaries. Their first contact was when Elliot was 11 years old and the stalker was in his early 20s. When Elliot turned 16, the stalker amped up his game. First, he sent Photoshop pictures of himself as an angel over Elliot. Then, he emailed all of Elliot's friends, declaring himself a friend of Elliot's who wanted to pay him a surprise visit. Elliot called the cops. He tells his father and receives rage instead of grace. His father can't believe Elliot let himself get groomed. For Elliot, the emails from the stalker paled in comparison to what his dad said. Despite getting a restraining order, the stalker finds Elliot in person on the street. Elliot yells for help. "Don't hurt me." It's enough to get passerby attention. He backs away, and Elliot runs. Elliot tells his father, and the stalker is arrested for violating the restraining order. The stalker is then diagnosed with schizophrenia. This is when Elliot's disordered eating grew and grew, which helps him both cope with being stalked, as well as the intense gender dysphoria from his body undergoing the wrong puberty. What hurts most is that his father reacted to the stalker not with compassion, but by blaming Elliot. Elliot copes with the trauma through self-harm. Quote, "People cut themselves, I'll try that. People get wasted, I'll try that. People stop eating, I'll try that. People repress, I'll try that." End quote. Another quote from the book says, "It is not as easy to forgive my father. I'm going to come to Toronto and kick your ass." When his kid needed safety, when his kid needed love, when his kid needed protection, he threatened violence. Outrage, because I had the audacity to communicate with an older man on the internet when I was a minor. If I didn't deserve care in that moment, if I didn't deserve safety and love, when would I ever? That sentence has lived in my body much longer than the man's threats, his obsession, his fingers fondling my arm. Chapter 7. Leeches. As a kid, Elliot dreams of turning into River Phoenix. He remembers shooting Pit Pony and discovering he can't act when his parents are around, so he surprises himself by asking them not to come to set anymore. The second surprise is that they stop coming without taking it personally. While his parents not being there frees him to act, it also leaves him vulnerable to more predators, which include an unnamed director and both male and female crew members. Perhaps fitting that his next feature film is Hard Candy, a story about a young person taking revenge on a pedophile. Chapter 8. Famous Asshole at Party. During Elliot's years as an actor, a famous asshole at a party attempts to shame and coerce Elliot into having sex with him to prove that Elliot isn't into women. Elliot is pressured by industry people to present as a cisgender, heterosexual woman. They urge him to play the game and match himself to other people's expectations. Around the same time as this harassment, Elliot delivers his speech at the Time to Thrive conference in which he comes out as queer. Quote, "On the flight, I obsessively read the speech, as if I could exhaust the emotion, mutating it into that old takeout menu in your kitchen drawer you glance at arbitrarily for no reason." Chapter 9. Pink Dot. It's 2022, Elliot is out as trans, and he's having the best sex of his life with a new partner named Madison. Later, Elliot is walking a short distance and encounters a stranger who yells and follows Elliot as he runs to a pink dot, where Madison meets him and they escape further accosting from the strange, yelling man. A quote from the book says, "He started coming faster. This time I ran, trying to reach Pink Dot before he reached me. That jolt of panic, a flashback to being with Justin on the hill or when another man in West Hollywood years before screamed, 'I'm gonna beat you into the ground, you ugly fucking dyke. I'll kill you before the police get here.' My friend Angela and I sped away in her car. Or when I ran from a group of teenagers who surrounded me at 18. 'It isn't Halloween. Why are you dressed up as a lesbian?' one of them asked as they approached, threatening me. Or when Paula and I dodged a friend of a friend who came at us around a bonfire, wasted and enraged by our snuggling. 'You don't have to shove it in our faces,' he barked. Others had to intervene, fighting him off until he stumbled away." Chapter 10. That Little Indie. Elliot has a tattoo on his upper right arm, just below the shoulder, that reads C. Keenes, which stands for his loving friendship with Catherine Keener. They met while filming An American Crime. Elliot's disordered eating gets worse. Dysphoria is a bitch. He claims it's research for a role, but Catherine can tell he needs care, sensing a struggle Elliot can't speak to. A quote from the book says, "The shoot became increasingly difficult. I'd crash at Keener's sometimes, especially after the more horrifying days. I felt taken care of there. We'd drink tequila and sit around her fire pit. We would blare music and dance, 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 a wide expanse of unknown adventures ahead. We met making a film wherein she murders me. In the real world, she was the only thing saving me." Chapter continues with him listening to Downtown by Petula Clark incessantly. He tends to be compulsive with songs. When he returns home, his mother's desperation at his emaciation motivates him to eat, but he still cannot force himself to swallow. The one thing that might pull him out is a role he really, really wants in Juno. He auditions with Michael Cera, though it was more of a screen test. Elliot was right for the role from the beginning. The filming experience is healing and helpful. Elliot meets Olivia Thirlby, the first woman with whom he has a properly consensual sexual relationship. A quote from the book says, "It was a job where I felt comfortable, able to start from a grounded place, versus outside my body, trying to crawl back in. Hair, wardrobe, and makeup at work was typically a nightmare for me. Ironically, playing a pregnant teenager was one of the first times I felt a modicum of autonomy on set. I was wearing a fake belly, but not being hyperfeminized. For me, Juno was emblematic of what could be possible, a space beyond the binary." Chapter 11. Only Kidding. Elliot did not vomit from the age of 11 to 28 due to his gender dysphoria being repressed and taking the ability to throw up with it. But once he came out as gay, the plug was undone. He remembers still getting sick and being pushed to go to soccer anyway. He remembers the antagonism he experienced from his stepmom, who seemed to resent Elliot as a burden from his dad's previous marriage. He remembers staying as a teenager at his dad's 2-story cabin, where he observed beavers aplenty making their homes in the water. He remembers his stepmother and step-siblings bullying him. In the late 1990s, Elliot loves rollerblading until he has a terrible spill, goes home, and the only person there is his cruel stepmom. She takes him to a clinic for treatment. The injury, a small tear in his vagina, later left Elliot worrying there was something wrong with his organ. When his first visit to an OBGYN confirms his vagina is just fine, he feels sad that he can no longer blame his injury on the reason he isn't having good sex. Chapter 12. Roller Derby. Elliot attends their first Oscars in 2008 for Juno. Their dysphoria is so bad that they consider quitting acting. He says no to roles if the wardrobe causes him too much dysphoria. He feels more alone than ever. He takes a role in Whip It, the directorial debut of Drew Barrymore. Elliot's aversion to the gloss of Hollywood is no match for the affinity between a closeted queer and the chance to learn roller derby. Elliot is still dating Paula, who stayed behind in Nova Scotia for a while, but then moves to LA with Elliot while he trains for Whip It. Training and filming for Whip It is safe and intimate alongside Drew Barrymore, Kristen Wiig, and the rest of the cast and crew. Paula works as his assistant, so as not to lose income and to complete the illusion that they aren't a couple. Elliot is terrified of coming out to the public. Paula is not out to her family. Elliot fights with Paula about who is closeting who the most. Elliot doesn't understand why he's pressured to remain in the closet when he sees countless cis straight actors celebrated for playing queer and trans characters. His manager tells him to keep his personal life private, even as countless cis and straight people declare they are straight and cisgender. A quote from the book says, "Hollywood is built on leveraging queerness, tucking it away when needed, pulling it out when beneficial while patting themselves on the back. Hollywood doesn't lead the way. It responds. It follows, slowly and far behind. The depth of that closet, the trove of secrets buried, indifferent to the consequences. I was punished for being queer while I watched others be protected and celebrated who gleefully abused people in the wide open. Chapter 13. Buckets. Elliot loves the movie E.T., dreamed of being the main character Elliot, and has an EP phone home tattoo. He begins to care about sustainable living. He learns essential sustainable living skills by taking the Permaculture Design Certificate course. It's a month of living and learning in an intentional community. He is away from the world of film and can wear whatever he wants. The experience is supportive and nurturing. The course covers everything from gray water systems to water catchment to garden design, composting to medicinal tinctures, fermentation to building a cob hut, and on and on. He meets a great friend named Ian. They share a kind of attraction that's more a curiosity and spontaneous authenticity around each other. Still dating Paula, but not talking as much, Elliot feels guilty for giving more of himself to this new adventure and friendship than his relationship. At the end of the permaculture course, Ian hosts a farewell party as a drag show event. He dresses as Courtney Love. Elliot dresses as Kurt Cobain. Chapter 14. UHaul. Elliot remembers being a teenager and trying to come out to his mom. She urged Elliot to stay away from the goth queers and be a normal girl. At 20, he told his mom he was in love with Paula. At 24, he told her again, "I'm gay, Mom. You know that, right?" Around 2010, Elliot falls for someone new and invites them to the premiere and after party for Super. He then convinces a friend to have a party simply so he can invite his crush. But that's where they first kiss and things turn steamy. Being with her is the first time Elliot is consistently around a queer friend group, but he still won't come out publicly, and that eventually suffocates their relationship. Elliot tries to date boys again, including a friend of Leonardo DiCaprio's during the filming of Inception. He jokes that during the whole shoot, he expected to be replaced by Keira Knightley. After years and years of conflict with his mom over being gay, they finally make peace. A quote from the book says, "In the end, it was she who initiated the conversation. She was ready, and so was I. We've never been closer, and her willingness to change and grow and move through the discomfort has been powerful and inspiring. She's become my ally. She loves her son endlessly. I'm lucky to have that, to feel such profound and genuine love. What was the most beautiful and meaningful was to watch her bloom as her old narratives and doctrines faded." Chapter 15. Ryan. At 26, Elliot hasn't publicly come out, but he assumes everyone knows he's queer. With his latest girlfriend, they wonder whether queerness is real or a product of privilege, a luxury to ask these questions. For once, it's Elliot who is mostly out and the other person who's in the closet. Despite the closet, they have lots of adventurous sex, sometimes in public places. They eventually break up, and Elliot feels gutted to then see her dating a man publicly in the way they had never been able to with Elliot. Chapter 16. Speedo. At 9 years old, Elliot is in his final year of co-ed soccer. Once it's over and he's on the team for girls, he learns that being mistaken for a boy was embarrassing, but filled him with gender euphoria. He makes a great friend named Tim and practices soccer under Tim's dad's tutelage. At Tim's house for an impromptu jump in a kiddie pool, Elliot wears his first Speedo, shirtless of course, and feels a rush of gender euphoria. He is young enough that no one bats an eye. Years later, Elliot has top surgery and loves being shirtless by the pool. A quote from the book says, "The backyard was no different than it had been. It didn't matter that an elastic nylon layer of skin was not hiding my chest. I was frolicking with my friends, just as kids. The only shift was in my happiness, a moment of knowing, a crisp focus, enhancing all the colors and sounds, a rush of joy." Chapter 17. Crash. Visiting his parents as an adult, Elliot wants to drop the performance, but he finds himself acting like a doll with a pull string. He says the things he is supposed to say while trying to find the space to just be himself. His father visits him with a vague promise of making amends or shedding guilt. Elliot hopes his father will finally apologize for letting Linda be so cruel to Elliot, but his dad instead says he is letting go of the guilt he felt at marrying Linda. He loves her and his life with her. Elliot feels crushed. It will take him several more years before he's willing to speak up to his dad. Chapter 18. Intuition. At 12 years old, Elliot knew he wanted to be an actor. His parents discouraged him not because they were being mean, but to be realistic about his chances. As a kid, he runs lines with his friend Jack for auditions. They play together and have a beautiful friendship. They write the Pigeon Manifesto, which is vague but empowers them to wander the streets advocating for pigeon rights. Elliot gets his first film lead in I Downloaded a Ghost. The roles start coming in. At 16, he's cast in Ghost Cat, where he first met his good friend Mark, who was much more sheltered than Elliot. The two develop an eternal bond. They drift apart, but reunite for their 22nd birthdays, which are 2 days apart. Elliot's on February 21st, Jack's on February 23rd. A quote from the book says, "Our relationship has been about helping each other find the truth, to push through our fears, our egos, and meaningless expectations. We protected that honesty, a safe space to land, a person who will see you even if you try to hide it." In many ways, the deep knowing I experienced with Mark mirrored what I'd left behind with Jack. Chapter 19. Old Navy. Elliot empathizes with his mom, who was a single mom and working parent who knew loss from a young age. His grandfather died when his mom was 16. His grandmother died when his mother was a kid, away studying overseas in France, while visiting relatives. Elliot has a brief hope that this will be different, but he finds that place as ill-suited to him being a tomboy as anywhere else. He wants to fit in at his cousin's sweet 16 birthday party, so he asks his mom, to her delight, to take him shopping at Old Navy for proper girl clothes. The new wardrobe is a double-edged sword. It makes Elliot feel dysphoria, but it makes his mom and classmates much happier with his appearance. A quote from the book says, "Their reaction to the girl I met in the mirror in an Old Navy in an industrial park on the outskirts of Richmond, Virginia was what I'd wished for, but my response to that attention was not. It only heightened the sting, stretching and contaminating the wound, more of its grotesqueness on display." Chapter 20. Just lean in. Elliot is in 10th grade and in love with a girl named Nikki, but he still dates boys, trying to make it work through sexual experimentation. But when Nikki turns 18, he gives her a card with hopefully suggestive enough lesbian innuendo. Their relationship escalates until they are caught almost kissing for the first time. Unfortunately, being caught deflates all of their momentum. As adults, however, they at least confess that they had feelings for each other. He remembers how his pursuit of Nikki resembles when he's at 16 and he pursued a woman in her 30s. Thankfully, it never went beyond Elliot sending her a mixtape. Quote from the card he sent to Nikki says, "Nikki, I am not always great with words in regards to expressing feelings and sharing my thoughts. As you turn 18, I just wanted to let you know that I really do think you are amazing. I have an immense amount of love and respect for you. Please be kind to yourself and know that no matter what you wish to talk about or to not talk about, I am here. I hope you enjoy this book. It has played an important role in my life, and I hope it touches your heart as it did mine. I don't know many people like you, so giving, so kind, and so hilarious. I wish you all the peace and love in the world you deserve so much. Ellen, XO." Chapter 21. The Healthy Way. Elliot remembers his first kiss with a girl as a teenager. She kissed him, and he got cold feet and made up an excuse to skedaddle. But several months later, they meet again at a classmate's house party, where they kiss and do much more. Chapter 22. Flatliners. While filming the Flatliners remake, Elliot and co-star Kiersey are put in a car for a stunt without safety belts. He remembers how unsafe the stunt was, and how unsafe he felt insisting that the stunt wasn't safe. One of the heads of production asks Elliot if he's mad his character isn't gay. Elliot is furious at the question, but the guy continues talking as though being pleasant means you aren't being queer-phobic. A producer pressures Elliot to wear hair extensions. Elliot increasingly stands up for himself, saying things like, "That sounds like queer-phobic code to me." A quote from the book says, "The studio just thinks." He looked back to the phone, scrolling down, images of my face, its long hair, makeup, lashes surrounding the eyes, enhancing the emptiness. A slideshow, a mood board for that soft and pretty look they craved. Chapter 23. U-Turn. Around his 30th birthday, Elliot first acknowledges he is trans. He remembers other times he either came out privately or was pressured to stay in the closet throughout the industry. This is when Elliot decides to go all in on being a lesbian woman to bury his transness, in part by marrying his ex-wife Emma. A quote from the book says, "The world tells us that we aren't trans, but mentally ill, that I'm too ashamed to be a lesbian, that I mutilated my body, that I will always be a woman, comparing my body to Nazi experiments. It is not trans people who suffer from a sickness, but the society that fosters such hate." Another quote says, "If a part of you is always separate, if existing in your body feels unbearable, love is an irresistible escape. You transcend a sensation so indescribable that philosophers, scientists, and writers can't seem to agree on what the fuck it even is, if it even is. I often wonder if I have actually experienced deep love. I feel as though I have, but is it real if you were never there, when you have numbed yourself to the truth?" And one more quote says, "Love was unwittingly an emotional disguise, and my relationship to it is another muscle to be transformed. I don't want to disappear. I want to exist in my body with these new possibilities. Possibilities." Perhaps that is one of the main components of life lost to lack of representation. Options erased from the imagination, narratives indoctrinated that we spend an eternity attempting to break. The unraveling is painful, but it leads you to you. Chapter 24, Your Heavenly Daddy. Coming out in 2014 as a gay woman was an important step in Elliot coming out as trans. Once he was out as any kind of queer, he felt empowered to explore the nooks and crannies he'd never allowed himself to explore, like having a one-night stand. All seems well until they're having sex and the girl begins to choke Elliot to a degree he's not into. But he doesn't say no, because too often it's either done nothing or made things worse. His first out proper date with a woman goes a lot better. They're nearly accosted by people yelling queer slurs at them, and the date teaches Elliot some martial arts defense moves. Then they check into a hotel for fun, sexy times. The next morning, Elliot has his first breakfast with her as an out queer person. The girl then buys him Maggie Nelson's Bluettes, a book Elliot falls in love with. He attends parties for movies, hoping to win awards, but one feels like an authentic celebration. The party for Adele Exarchopoulos, the star of Blue is the Warmest Color. He wishes he could eternal sunshine of the spotless mind his memories of his ex, Ryan. He meets and begins dating Kate Mara in a kind of open relationship, because Kate's boyfriend at the time does not mind if Kate and Elliot date each other on the side. There's a very tender moment where an earthquake hit California. Elliot urgently went to text Kate to see if she was okay, but Kate sent a text first asking the same of Elliot. On a flight to LA, a priest and his curate pass Elliot a note praying for his queer soul. Elliot chooses not to say anything. But then, fractures begin to appear in his relationship with Kate. The first major crack comes when Elliot expects solo time with Kate, but she brings her boyfriend Max along. Elliot is in a pretty bad mood. Kate feels conflicted too, saying she didn't think it was possible to love two people at the same time. Despite the relationship eventually ending, Elliot continues to have strong affection and good memories around Kate Mara. A quote from the book says, "My tendency was to fantasize, not look or respond to what was actually happening. I did not listen, and to put it bluntly, I was codependent. Only now am I finally moving away from that. Better boundaries, less fearful, more open-hearted, stronger, with a burgeoning confidence I did not possess before." Chapter 25, Choosing Family. At 13, Elliot tells his mom he wants to live with her and not go back with her dad and Linda. But her father's tears send a wave of shame through Elliot, and he backs down, returning to spending alternate parts of the month with his dad. Not long after his 30th birthday, Elliot comes clean with his dad about Linda. The conversation does not go well. Elliot tries going no contact with his father and finds himself consumed with grief. He is supported through that time by a deep friendship with a woman named Julia. A quote from the book says, "My father changed depending on who was around. With Linda, he would shut down with me, but alone with me, he shared deep love, blurring emotional boundaries. Perhaps this was the only way he knew how to remain close, scavenging for connection when he could and protecting it ours alone." Another quote says, "I can see now how moments like these, between me, my mom, my dad, silently paved the way for my future relationship dynamics. I would throw the feeling aside, worried I'd get in trouble for having them, remaining in situations a lot longer than I should have, hide my truth. Inevitably, this would always lead to more damage and more harm. Like the many ways in which I have been difficult for people, my abrupt shifts, shutting down mixed with the instinct to run, being dishonest because I felt so irrationally frightened. Another quote says, "To be frank, it is hard to imagine a relationship again. Dennis and Linda support those with massive platforms who have attacked and ridiculed me on a global scale. Regardless of everything before, it's painful to think that someone who parented you could support those who deny your very existence." Chapter 26. Mask. When the pandemic hits in 2020, Elliot finally finds out how to go mask off. Ironically, the pandemic was the catalyst. When he puts on a mask, he feels certain in his trans-masculine presentation. People assume he is a boy until he speaks. He continues opening up in therapy about his gender. He first contemplates top surgery. He makes a great friend named Maureen, who he is able to open up with about his gender from the beginning. He continues putting off transitioning. Thanks to a close friend, Elliot stays in a cabin in the middle of nowhere for a long part of the pandemic. The cabin is in the middle of an orchard left to grow and bear fruit. It is a peaceful time in which Elliot discovers serenity with his true self. He reconnects with an old friend named Nikki. They go swimming, and wearing a sports bra to press down his chest helps Elliot see what's in front of him. Transition is now an option he can choose for himself. Chapter 27. Portal. At the cabin, Elliot reconnects with his creativity and an old friend named Beatrice. They write a screenplay together, and while at the cabin, Elliot pens many of the pages being read in his memoir. He asks Bea, "When was the first time I spoke to you about potentially being trans?" The obsession finally gets the best of him, and returning to coping with self-harm, Elliot hits himself hard enough in the face that he needs makeup to hide the bruise. The dam breaks. He hears a voice telling him, "You don't have to feel this way." His own voice telling him, "I don't have to feel this way." Chapter 28. No words. At 33 years old, Elliot is about to film the third season of The Umbrella Academy and needs to have top surgery soon or it won't be possible until production has wrapped. At first, it seems he will need to wait, but then there's a cancellation and he is able to move his appointment forward enough to have top surgery before filming season 3 begins. He reflects on the authenticity of his struggle and his privilege. He extends compassion for people who are in more trying circumstances than what he faced, while also showing grace to his own struggle. November 12th to November 17th are spent preparing for top surgery. Then the moment comes. Then Elliot is finally whole. After the surgery, Elliot's friend Mark takes him back to home to recover. Mark is the witness to Elliot expressing bursts of grief and anger at all the time lost, at all the self-hate, at all that could have been. The most painful part is having the drains removed. The best part is purchasing way too many button-down shirts, looking at himself in a mirror, and taking a picture of his big-ass grin. Before and after the surgery, he comes out to friends who give him a mixture of responses. Some quietly accept him. Others need to make a comment or offer unsolicited advice. Elliot tries to be patient with the people who still get his pronouns wrong. As he writes this book, he has been on testosterone for over a year. A quote from the book says, "Even though I am extremely lucky, this narrative where trans people have to feel lucky for these crumbs that we fought hard for and still fight for is perverse and manipulative. Here is the thing. I almost did not make it. The now I finally have I did not see, and all I knew was permanent emptiness, a mystery I would never solve. Incessant, without language, a depth of despair. Shameful, with all that I had, what dreams are made of. I did nothing but sink, dread blanketing me. I couldn't see what was in front of me. I should not have to grovel with gratitude. Am I grateful? Fuck yeah. But everyone should have access to gender-affirming and life-saving healthcare. It just should be." Chapter 29. Peaches. 16 years old, and with Mark by his side, Elliot attends a terrific Peaches concert. The space is infinitely queer and affirming for Elliot, a great bookend to a non-linear journey for Elliot Page. A quote from the book says, "For a 16-year-old trans kid, she offered something that I could not find elsewhere. A voice that said fuck shame, fuck gender stereotypes, fuck not embracing your desires, and fuck not owning yourself. And the final quote says, taking a deep breath, exhaling down to my toes, I wanted to hold on to the feeling, to pocket the joy, the fleeting moments of self-love. Marching home with Mark in the cold, I felt the soles of my feet pressing the ground, one foot then the other. I sensed I was heading in the right direction. That's the end of Page Boy. Thanks for going on this journey with us through Elliot Page's memoir. If you want to support future episodes of Queer History, please like, share, and consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack. If you have just a few dollars to spare, please head to my GoFundMe, which is fundraising to pay for electrolysis to remove my remaining facial hair. Every contribution you make is appreciated more than I can say.